In this lesson, we'll explain the key differences in design workflow from Solidworks to Fusion 360. After completing this lesson, you'll be able to explain the key differences in workflow between Solidworks and Fusion 360. If you're fresh off the Solidworks boat and have discovered the new land of Fusion 360, you're probably here for a few reasons. You may have discovered Fusion 360 while searching for an answer to a modeling question. Or you came across it on various blog or CAD sites, touting the power of Fusion 360. Or maybe a coworker or friend told you or asked you about Fusion 360 in passing. Or, and this is the big one, you're here because you want to stay on the cutting edge of CAD technology, and Fusion 360 is that answer. There are many reasons why someone would consider leaving their comfy CAD system for the new kid on the block. Functionality, a work initiative, or cost, to name a few. I've personally put many hours on SolidWorks and many other CAD systems out there, including Fusion 360. So I want to point out some of the growing pains that users are likely to go through when making the switch. So that way you can get right into modeling and skip the potential headache. I came up with 7 different principles to make sure that we get started on the right foot. Principle 1, the cloud. Your data is on the cloud, and you're just going to have to get used to that. But you will be happy you did. I often hear from people how they could never work with their data all on the cloud and how disruptive it is to their workflow. And I get it, I really do, but with great power comes great responsibility. There are so many issues associated with local file storage. For example, tracking the file versions, the storage size, making copies, and so on. Working with your data in the cloud allows you the freedom to design and collaborate, knowing your data is wherever you are without making copies. Because your data is in the cloud, it is very easy to collaborate with other users from anywhere at any time. So not only can you leverage the cloud storage, you can also leverage the cloud for computing as well. You can now process simulations, solve generative design studies, make high-quality renders, and more without eating up precious computing resources or time. You no longer have to sit there and watch your computer render because your system is rendered useless. Principle number 2. The complete package. It's not just CAD. Fusion 360 is the complete package. It's parametric and freeform CAD design, direct editing, animations, rendering, simulation, generative design, mesh editing, and CAM, all wrapped up into one. And yes, that is all for the same price. You don't have to buy a third-party add-in to run CAM or decide between buying a car or upgrading your simulation package. Principle number 3, service with a smile. Service packs? There are no service packs. Never worry about someone sending you a version of a file that you can't open. With SolidWorks, that often happens. You have to have the newest version to open the newest files. But you don't have to worry about that or having a file saved in a student version. With Fusion 360, everyone's on the same platform that updates regularly. That means that you not only get the latest and the greatest of everything, but problems that pop up, because we all know that they do, get fixed right away. On top of that, Fusion 360 tosses in preview technology that's not fully released yet, but that you can turn on and try out. So be sure that when something is baked into the product for full release, that it is solid. And yes, there is an offline mode, and you do have the ability to create a local cache of your projects just in case you want to work offline. But honestly, how often do you work disconnected? If you lose your connection while working, just keep working. Save the file, and when the network is back up, the files update themselves automatically. It's that easy. Principle number 4, one file is all you need. Sketches, bodies, components, and assemblies are all in one design. This is probably the hardest thing for a SolidWorks user to grasp. If you think of it as a multi-body part file that you can also have be an assembly with motion, renders, simulation data, subdivided models, CAM toolpaths, and so on. It's crazy, right? But it works. So now you can still have individual files and link them into what's called a distributed design, and there are reasons why we might do that. With those types of designs, you even have some really cool functionality that lets you choose which version you want to use, and you can even break links and bring the entire model in. And get this, that includes all the sketches and features. And that's right, no more dumb solids that you have to edit in context. You can even create what's called a derived design, which lets you pull out parts of an assembly and put it into its own design. The point is the workflow and file structure is streamlined, so you no longer have to keep track of those references and worry if your assembly relationships are broken. Principle number 5, location. Here's one that throws everyone for a loop the first time. Your feature manager tree in Solidworks is essentially split into two different things. In Solidworks, that area on the left handles properties, configurations, appearances, in addition to the features, sketches, and the other data. In Fusion 360, the area on the left of the screen is called the browser, and that contains information like sketches, origins, bodies and components, and analysis views like sections, zebra stripes, and so on. The timeline is located at the bottom of the modeling area, and that captures a time-based history of sketches, features, movements, and so much more. Even better, this area can show you features that belong to only certain components during edits to really simplify what you're looking at. And if you want to, you can turn off Capture History, but we'll get to that a bit later. Principle 6, Degrees of Freedom. Another difference that you'll have to get acquainted with is how to build assemblies in motion. If you think about mates in a SolidWorks assembly, there are standard mates, things like concentric and parallel. Then you have advanced mates and mechanical mates. These combine several of them together, such as a hinge mate. In Fusion 360, however, you assemble components with a joint to describe the desired motion. You pick a joint based on its degrees of freedom, and you give it a point that will align to the components. Even better, there are things called as-built joints that make use of the design location of components. This makes the selection process even easier. This will start to make sense once we work through some examples, but it is a very logical process once you break the thought process of having to apply 3 or 4 mates to put components together. Principle number 7, up to date. If you've ever been to SolidWorks World, then you know the excitement on day 3 when you're finally given a preview of the next year's release of features and upgrades. On the surface, they always seem so appealing, but in reality, there's attempts to fix stuff that isn't working quite right and show off a handful of updates. Fusion 360's development team has done the unthinkable. There's a public roadmap of what they're working on for months in advance. Updates happen regularly in the order of weeks instead of months, bringing updates in functionality and fixes all the time. If that wasn't good enough, there's a community forum where they actually listen to the users and new features are suggested and voted on. This makes them a priority for development. So that means that you have more control over what you see in the program, simply by voting up the different options. An example of this is the XYZ axis behind the view cube. This was requested and voted on by users, and it showed up in the software in the very next update. That's pretty cool, right? As we begin modeling in Fusion 360, it'll all start to make sense, but the biggest hurdle in the process will be you. Yep, you have to decide to learn how to work in Fusion 360. Rather than trying to make it work like something else. Once you're able to openly explore the many different ways you can design and manage your data, you'll start to wonder why every program doesn't work this way.